Johnny Carson leaned back in his chair, tapped his pen twice against his desk, and asked the one question no one in Hollywood had the courage to ask for 23 years. It was November 14th, 1987. The Tonight Show studio fell completely silent. 12 million viewers held their breath. Ann-Margret sat across from him, her smile frozen, her hands trembling in her lap. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed 100 ways to dodge it, but something in Johnny's eyes told her tonight was different. Tonight, the truth was coming out whether she was ready or not. The question was simple. 5 words. But those 5 words carried the weight of decades, of secrets, of a love story that Hollywood tried to bury and Priscilla Presley spent years trying to forget. Johnny asked about Elvis, about Priscilla, about what really happened between Ann-Margret and the king of rock and roll back in 1964. And for the first time in her life, Ann-Margret didn't look away. Her voice cracked, her eyes filled with tears, and what she said next changed everything America thought they knew about Elvis Presley's marriage, about the woman who almost became his wife, and about a promise she made to a dying man that she had kept hidden for over a decade. But here's what nobody expected. Ann-Margret didn't just talk about Elvis that night. She revealed something about Priscilla, something Elvis himself had told her in a private phone call just 3 weeks before he died. Something Priscilla had never heard. Something that would finally explain why Elvis never stopped sending Ann-Margret flowers. Why he called her on every single birthday. Why, even on his deathbed, he whispered her name. What did Elvis tell Ann-Margret about Priscilla that he never had the courage to say to his own wife? What secret had Ann-Margret been carrying since August 1977? And why did she choose this exact moment on live television to finally let it go? The answer will break your heart. But first, you need to understand what really happened between Ann-Margret and Elvis. The affair that shook Hollywood, the love that never died, and the one decision that haunted both of them for the rest of their lives. If you've ever loved someone you couldn't have, this story will hit different. Stay with me. And if you're watching right now, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from. I read every single one. It started on a movie set in the summer of 1963. July 15th, Las Vegas. The first day of filming for Viva Las Vegas. Elvis Presley walked onto that set as the biggest star in the world. Ann-Margret walked on as a 22-year-old actress with fire in her eyes and a voice that could match his note for note. The director called action. And within 5 minutes, everyone on that set knew something dangerous was happening. The chemistry wasn't acting. It was real. Too real. Elvis couldn't stop looking at her. Ann-Margret couldn't stop smiling at him. By the end of the first week, they were inseparable. By the end of the first month, they were in love. And by the time filming wrapped, Elvis had told Ann-Margret something he had never told any woman before. He told her she was the female version of himself. They understood each other in ways no one else could. Both came from nothing. Both clawed their way to the top. Both hid their loneliness behind bright lights and screaming fans. When they were together, they didn't have to pretend. They didn't have to perform. They could just be two broken people, finding peace in each other. Elvis took her to meet his family in Memphis. He talked about marriage. He made promises. Late nights on the phone. Secret trips. Hidden hotel rooms. Ann-Margret believed every word. She thought she was going to be Mrs. Elvis Presley. She thought the fairy tale was real. But there was a problem. A big problem. Her name was Priscilla Beaulieu. She was waiting for Elvis back in Memphis. A young girl he had met in Germany when she was just 14 years old. A girl he had promised to marry. A girl who had no idea that while she was planning her future with Elvis, he was falling in love with someone else. Elvis was living a double life. And Ann-Margret was about to find out the hard way that being the love of Elvis Presley's life didn't mean she would be his wife. What happened next shattered her heart into a million pieces. And it all started with a newspaper headline she never saw coming. Before I tell you what that headline said, let me ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone completely and then discovered they were hiding something that changed everything? Drop your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else who's been through the same pain. It was a cold morning in December 1966. Ann-Margret was sitting in her living room, coffee in hand, flipping through the newspaper. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just passing time before a meeting with her agent. Then she turned a page, and her entire world collapsed. The headline hit her like a punch to the chest. Elvis Presley engaged to Priscilla. She read it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. The words didn't change. The photo didn't lie. There was Elvis smiling, his arm around Priscilla, a diamond ring sparkling on her finger. Ann-Margret couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't understand how the man who had whispered forever into her ear just 2 weeks ago was now engaged to someone else. She waited for the phone to ring, waited for Elvis to call and explain, to tell her it was a mistake, a publicity stunt, anything. The phone never rang. Not that day, not the next day, not the day after that. Elvis Presley, the man who had called her every single night for 3 years, went completely silent. Ann-Margret later described that week as the darkest of her life. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't work. Her mother found her crying on the bathroom floor at 3 in the morning. Her friends didn't know what to do. The woman who lit up every room she walked into had become a ghost of herself. But here's what made it worse. The press started calling. Reporters wanted her reaction. Photographers camped outside her house. Everyone wanted to know how the other woman felt about Elvis choosing Priscilla. Ann-Margret said nothing, not one word. She protected Elvis even when he had just destroyed her. She smiled for the cameras, denied any romantic relationship, and pretended her heart wasn't bleeding. Why did Elvis choose Priscilla over Ann-Margret? The truth is complicated. Some say Colonel Parker pressured him. Some say Elvis felt obligated to Priscilla because of promises he made years earlier. Some say he was afraid of Ann-Margret because she was his equal and he couldn't control her the way he could control a younger, more dependent woman. But Elvis never stopped loving Ann-Margret, and what he did next proved it. Even after his wedding, even after Priscilla became his wife, even after Lisa Marie was born, Elvis kept a secret connection with Ann-Margret that Priscilla always suspected but could never prove. Until now. Because what I'm about to tell you is what Ann-Margret finally revealed on Johnny Carson's show that night. The hidden relationship that lasted through Elvis's entire marriage. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button and stay with me. This story is just getting started. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from right now? Elvis married Priscilla on May 1st, 1967. The ceremony was small, private, held at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. The whole world celebrated the king finally settling down. But what the world didn't know was that just 3 hours before Elvis said "I do," he made a phone call, a secret phone call, to Ann-Margret. She almost didn't answer. Her hand hovered over the phone for 4 rings. Part of her wanted to let it go to voicemail. Part of her wanted to scream at him. But when she heard his voice, all the anger melted away. Elvis was crying. He told her he was sorry. He told her this wasn't what he wanted. He told her that marrying Priscilla was something he had to do, not something he chose to do. And then he said 5 words that Ann-Margret would carry with her for the rest of her life. He said, "You're the one I love." Ann-Margret didn't know what to say. How do you respond to a man who is about to marry someone else while confessing his love to you? She told him she understood. She told him she would always care about him. And then she hung up the phone and cried until she had nothing left. But that phone call wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because Elvis never let go. Not really. Every single time Ann-Margret opened a new show in Vegas, a massive bouquet of flowers arrived backstage. The card always said the same thing. A secret message. A private joke. A code that only they understood. The flowers came for years. Through his marriage. Through his divorce. Through his decline. They never stopped. Priscilla found one of those cards once. It was 1970. She was backstage at one of Elvis's shows and saw the flowers in his dressing room. She asked who they were for. Elvis said they were going to Ann-Margret for her opening night. Priscilla's face went pale. She asked why he was sending flowers to his ex-girlfriend. Elvis looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Because that's what friends do." But Priscilla knew better. She had seen the way Elvis lit up whenever Ann-Margret's name was mentioned. She had noticed how he always knew exactly where Ann-Margret was performing, who she was dating, what movie she was making. She had heard him whisper Ann-Margret's name in his sleep, and she had spent her entire marriage feeling like she was competing with a ghost she could never defeat. The truth was painful but simple. Elvis loved Priscilla. He did, but he was in love with Ann-Margret. There's a difference, and that difference slowly poisoned his marriage from the inside out. Priscilla felt it every day. The distance, the coldness, the way Elvis looked at her, sometimes like he was looking through her, searching for someone else. When Priscilla finally filed for divorce in 1972, she told friends that she felt like she had been sharing her husband with another woman for their entire marriage. She didn't name Ann-Margret specifically. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. But here's what Priscilla didn't know. She didn't know about the phone calls, the late-night conversations Elvis and Ann-Margret had 2 or 3 times a month, the confessions, the regrets, the one conversation that happened just 3 weeks before Elvis died, the conversation where Elvis told Ann-Margret something about Priscilla that would have changed everything. And Ann-Margret kept that secret for 10 years, until Johnny Carson asked her the question she couldn't dodge anymore. It was July 26, 1977. 3 weeks before Elvis died, Ann-Margret was at home in Los Angeles, getting ready for bed, when the phone rang at 11:47 p.m. She knew who it was before she answered. Only one person called that late. Only one person had that number. Elvis sounded different that night. His voice was tired, slower than usual. There was something heavy in his words, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't put down. Ann-Margret asked if he was okay. He said no. He said he hadn't been okay for a long time. And then he started talking. Really talking. The way he used to when they were young and in love, and the world hadn't broken them yet. He talked about his life. About the pills. About the loneliness that fame couldn't fix. About how he felt trapped in a body that was failing him and a career that had become a prison. And then he talked about Priscilla. What he said next made Ann-Margret's heart stop. Elvis said he had made the biggest mistake of his life when he let Priscilla go. Not when he married her. When he lost her. He said he pushed her away. He said he was so afraid of losing her that he controlled her until she had no choice but to leave. He said he never told her the truth about how much she meant to him because he didn't know how. And now it was too late. But here's the part that haunted Ann-Margret for the next 10 years. Elvis asked her to do something. He asked her to tell Priscilla, if anything ever happened to him, that he was sorry, that he loved her more than she ever knew, that the divorce wasn't her fault, that he destroyed their marriage because he was broken inside and didn't know how to be the man she needed. Ann-Margret promised she would. She thought she had time. She thought Elvis would get better. She thought she would see him again, laugh with him again, maybe even tell him that she forgave him for everything. 3 weeks later, on August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was dead, and Ann-Margret was left holding a promise she didn't know how to keep. How do you call the ex-wife of the man you loved and deliver his final message? How do you explain a secret relationship that lasted over a decade? How do you tell Priscilla that Elvis's last thoughts weren't about the pills or the fame or the music? They were about her. Ann-Margret didn't know how. So she stayed silent. For 10 long years, she carried that message like a stone in her chest, until Johnny Carson gave her no choice but to let it go. If this story is hitting your heart right now, hit the like button and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I want to know who's on this journey with me. The Tonight Show studio was dead silent. Johnny Carson had just asked the question about Elvis, about Priscilla, about what really happened. Ann-Margret felt the weight of 12 million eyes on her. She felt the heat of the studio lights. She felt her heart pounding, so hard, she thought the microphone might pick it up. For a moment, she almost deflected, almost gave the same polished answer she had given 100 times before. We were just friends. We cared about each other. It was a long time ago. But something inside her broke that night. Maybe it was the 10 years of silence. Maybe it was the guilt of carrying Elvis's last message and never delivering it. Maybe she was just tired of pretending. Ann-Margret took a deep breath, and then she told the truth. She said Elvis was the love of her life. She said they had a connection that never went away. Not when he married Priscilla. Not when she married Roger. Not even when he died. She said Elvis called her 3 weeks before he passed and told her things she had never shared with anyone. And then she said something that made Johnny Carson lean forward in his chair. She said Elvis asked her to deliver a message to Priscilla, a message she had been too afraid to deliver for 10 years. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes filled with tears, and spoke as if Priscilla was watching. And maybe she was. Ann-Margret said Elvis wanted Priscilla to know that losing her was his greatest regret, that he never stopped loving her, that the divorce broke him in ways the world never saw, that he was sorry for every moment he made her feel like she wasn't enough, that she was always enough. He just didn't know how to show it. The studio audience didn't move. Johnny Carson didn't speak. America held its breath. Ann-Margret wiped her tears and said she hoped Priscilla could forgive her for waiting so long. She hoped Priscilla could finally have peace. And she hoped Elvis, wherever he was, knew that she had finally kept her promise. The interview ended, but the story didn't, because the next morning, Priscilla Presley picked up the phone and made a call that no one expected. The morning after the Carson interview, Priscilla Presley sat alone in her living room. The television was off. The house was quiet. She had watched every second of Ann-Margret's confession the night before. She had heard Elvis's final message, the words he never had the courage to say to her face, the apology she had waited over a decade to hear. For a long time, Priscilla didn't move. She just sat there, letting the tears fall, letting the years of anger and suspicion and hurt slowly drain out of her. And then she did something she never thought she would do. She picked up the phone and dialed Ann-Margret's number. The conversation lasted over an hour. 2 women who had spent years as silent rivals finally spoke the truth. Priscilla thanked Ann-Margret for delivering Elvis's message. Ann-Margret apologized for the years of secrecy, for loving a man who belonged to someone else, for carrying a burden she should have shared sooner. They cried together. They laughed together. They forgave each other for things that were never really their fault. Because the truth was simple. They weren't enemies. They were both casualties of loving Elvis Presley, a man who had more love at his heart than he knew what to do with, a man who was broken in ways that fame and fortune could never fix, a man who left behind 2 women who finally found peace not by holding on to the past, but by letting it go. Ann-Margret and Priscilla never became best friends, but they became something more important. They became 2 people who understood each other. 2 people who shared a loss that no one else could fully comprehend. 2 people who finally stopped competing for a ghost and started honoring his memory together. Some secrets are meant to stay hidden, but some secrets need to come out so that healing can begin. Ann-Margret carried Elvis's message for 10 years, and when she finally let it go, she didn't just free herself. She freed Priscilla too. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Ring the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to speak the truth, and it's never too late to forgive. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? What part of this story hit you the hardest? I read every single comment, and your words might bring comfort to someone else who's carrying a secret they're afraid to let go. We have more powerful stories coming. Stories about love, loss, and the moments that change everything. Stay with me. I'll see you in the next one.